While the history of Western civilization has been well documented, often emphasizing the achievements of the Greeks and Romans, the foundational role played by black civilizations in the ancient so-called Near East has not always received the recognition it deserves. The Sumerians, who inhabited the region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, are credited with founding one of the earliest known civilizations. Historian Runoko Rashidi and other scholars argue that the brilliance of Sumerian civilization can be attributed to black migrants from the African Nile Valley. These early settlers laid the groundwork for the rise of Mesopotamia, a civilization that would influence countless cultures that followed. During the 3rd millennium BCE, the southern portion of the Mesopotamian valley was known as Sumer and Akkad. The Sumerians are often regarded as a mysterious people, with some scholars suggesting that they were neither Indo-European nor Semitic. Instead, the Sumerians have been linked to black populations, as evidenced by their self-identification as Zalmat Gagadu, meaning a people of black heads. This assertion is supported by archaeological discoveries, such as statues and inscriptions depicting Sumerian rulers with distinct African features. The Sumerians were pioneers in many areas of civilization. They developed one of the earliest systems of writing, known as cuneiform, which was used for recording everything from economic transactions to religious texts. The Sumerians also created a complex social structure, establishing city-states such as Ur, Lagash, and Uruk, which were governed by priest-kings. These cities were centers of trade, religion, and culture, playing a crucial role in the spread of knowledge and ideas. The legacy of the Sumerian civilization is profound, with their innovations and ideas shaping the development of later cultures in the Near East and beyond. The Akkadians, who conquered Sumer around 2340 BCE, adopted many aspects of Sumerian culture, including their writing system, religious practices, and legal codes. Even after the fall of Sumer, the influence of this early civilization persisted, as the Babylonians, Assyrians, and Persians all drew upon Sumerian traditions in their own societies. In addition to their impact on the ancient Near East, the contributions of the Sumerians have had a lasting effect on the broader course of human history. The development of writing, mathematics, and law in Sumer provided the foundation for many of the intellectual and cultural achievements that would follow in other parts of the world. The Sumerians' pioneering spirit and innovative mindset continue to inspire scholars and historians today. Most people are familiar with Assyria as the empire that invaded Egypt during the reign of the 25th dynasty's Nubian pharaohs. However, beyond this connection, Assyria was the largest empire and one of the greatest civilizations in Mesopotamian history, reaching its peak between the 10th and 7th centuries BCE. Before Assyria emerged in what is now northern Iraq, the region was home to earlier civilizations, including Sumer, which is considered one of the first civilizations in the world. Sumer was followed by the Akkadian Empire, Babylon, and eventually Assyria. This sequence of civilizations suggests that the Assyrians may have had connections to early black populations. It's important to remember that West Asia, like much of the world, was originally inhabited by black populations who migrated out of Africa. Among these early inhabitants were the Sumerians, the first civilizers of Mesopotamia, who are believed to have had Nubian Egyptian roots. Ancient traditions, including those recorded in the Bible, support this, mentioning Nimrod, the son of Cush, as the founder of Mesopotamian civilization. Cush refers to the region of present-day Sudan. Around 4,500 years ago, populations from northern Eurasia arrived in Mesopotamia, where they encountered the region's original black inhabitants. This interaction led to the development of Semitic languages, with Akkadian being one of the earliest. As a result, Mesopotamia became a diverse region, home to black, white, and mixed-race people. Egyptian records provide ample evidence of this diversity. In these ancient civilizations, the Old Sumerian language, originally spoken by the black inhabitants of the region, remained the language of tradition and religion, while Akkadian became the language of government. The religion practiced was rooted in African traditions. It is worth noting that the city of Assur, located in northern Iraq, began as a Sumerian settlement. In its early days, Assur was a thriving trade city, under the influence of various powers, including the Sumerians, the Black Elamites, the Babylonians, and the Mitannians. Around 1300 BCE, Assur gained independence and began to expand its territory, marking the beginning of the Assyrian Empire, which lasted about a century. After a period of decline, during which Assur's influence was limited to its immediate surroundings, King Adad-nirari II launched a series of military campaigns in 911 BCE, leading to the rise of the Assyrian Empire, the peak of Assyrian civilization. The Assyrian capital was relocated several times, first from the city of Assur to Nimrod, and later to Nineveh. The Assyrian Empire eventually fell in the 7th century BCE, when it was conquered by Babylon. The Sumerians were indeed black, like many of the early populations in Asia. Several pieces of evidence support this. For example, as historian Adolf Bloch notes in his book, On the Race That Preceded the Semites in Chaldea, Mesopotamia, and Susiana, the Sumerians referred to themselves as Zalmat Gargadu, which means a people of black heads. For instance, Sargon I of Babylon, who ruled 3,800 years before the Christian era, gave himself the title of Sovereign of the Black-Headed People, among other titles such as King of Akkad and Sumer, etc. In a tablet where he recounts his life, Sargon boasts of having subdued this black people. The cuneiform text states, "When a king who succeeds me in the future governs, like me, the black-headed people." On another tablet, this black race reappears concerning an offense committed against the god Anu, and it is recounted that this god, seeking revenge, threatened to incite the black-headed people against those who wronged him. 3,000 years after Sargon, a Babylonian king, Merodach-Baladan II, who ruled as late as the 700 BCE, still titled himself King of the Black-Headed People. Then Ashurbanipal, king of Assyria in the 7th century BCE, also called himself the dominator of the black-headed people. Another king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, around 500 BCE, when speaking of this same people, expressed the hope that his descendants could always rule the black-headed people. Finally, Cyrus, the great king of Persia and Elam, also subdued the black-headed people, a fact recorded on a cylinder discovered in Babylon in 1879. It is clear that the subjugation of this black race was highly valued, not only by the Babylonian and Assyrian kings, but also by other conquerors. But what did they mean by black-headed people? Most Western scholars bearing the academic title of Assyriologists attempt to explain the meaning of these expressions by saying that they applied to humanity in general, without specifying a particular race. However, in an excerpt from cuneiform texts, black-headed people are mentioned not in relation to a king, but to a god, proving that it did not refer to humanity in general. Some Western scholars state that it simply means black hair. But all the Semites and non-Semitic peoples who inhabited this part of Mesopotamia must have had black or nearly black hair. So it is not the color of the hair that could have distinguished them from one another. The most rational interpretation is that this term refers to a distinct race with black, or at least very dark skin. This idea is also reflected in biblical traditions. Nimrod, the son of Cush, is mentioned as the legendary founder of Mesopotamia. Cush refers to the region of Nubia in present-day Sudan and southern Egypt, suggesting that Nimrod was of Nubian origin. The ancient historian Diodorus Siculus adds that the Chaldeans, who were Mesopotamians, were originally Egyptian priests who migrated to Mesopotamia. Archaeological evidence from the city of Kish, dating back to around 2500 BCE, supports this view. Of 26 skulls found there, 18 were identified as dolichocephalic, indicating African ancestry, while only 2 were brachycephalic, indicating a different racial background. The Sumerians, like many African civilizations, worshipped a single deity that had both male and female aspects, with many forms and manifestations. This deity was called Anu for the male aspect, and Antu for the female aspect, which parallels the Egyptian practice of adding a T to a deity's name to denote femininity. In Egypt, for example, Imana or Amen was the male name for God, while Aminata was the female equivalent. Cities in Sumer were governed by priest kings, similar to practices in African civilizations, and the black civilization of Sheba in Arabia. This culture was largely sedentary and agricultural, much like the pharaonic civilization, and it thrived in the fertile valleys of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Some of its cities bore names such as Kish, Ur, and Mari, with the latter two names being quite common in ancient Egypt. Sumer also appears to have inherited the African tradition of matriarchy. Before the arrival of patriarchal cultures from the north, women in Sumer enjoyed the same rights and privileges as men. The African-American historian Runoko Rashidi, in his book Millennial History of Africans in Asia, suggests that the brilliance of Sumerian civilization can only be attributed to the arrival of black migrants from the African Nile Valley. Similarly, English scholar George Rawlinson, in the first volume of his book, The Seven Great Monarchies of the Ancient Eastern World, argues that the advanced civilization of the Nile Valley, which predates early Chaldea by several centuries, supports the idea of a migration from west to east. He notes that Chaldean monuments and traditions hint at an East African origin. Rawlinson concludes that it is likely that the people identified as Nimrod in the Bible and as Belus by the Greeks migrated from East Africa to the Euphrates Valley via what is now Arabia. In what is now modern-day Iran, the Elamites once thrived. In the early 20th century, French archaeologist Marcel Auguste Dieulafoy uncovered remains of the Elam civilization. He described sculptures of kings adorned in luxurious clothing, jewels, and feline skins, similar to those found in Africa. Notably, these figures were depicted with black skin. Dieulafoy suggested that Elam might have been ruled by a black dynasty. Additionally, the ancient Greek historian Herodotus, who visited the region in the 5th century BCE, noted the presence of black people with straight hair. Over time, these black populations were gradually absorbed through intermarriage with migrating groups from Eurasia. According to this perspective, the Sumerian civilization, like those of the Phoenicians and Persians, has its roots in Africa, specifically in the Nile Valley, challenging the traditional notion of Sumer being a pure white civilization. Until the lions have their own historians, the tales of the hunt will always glorify the hunter.